Hello and welcome. Today we're going to turn our analytical lens to a text of, well, profound and challenging depth. We'll be examining a collection of philosophical treatises known as Echoes of the Universal Malice. It's a work that really demands some rigorous intellectual engagement, and our goal today is to bring its core concepts into focus. The text opens with this rather evocative passage. It really sets a tone of, cyclical despair and existential dread. It's a powerful, if somewhat cryptic way to kick things off and get us into the work's central themes.
Okay, let's dive right in. Now, our goal here isn't to find simple answers. Far from it. We are going to try and deconstruct the complex, and let's be honest, often contradictory arguments presented by the key speakers in this collection. We're attempting to put some structure around what often feels pretty unknowable.
So, just to be clear, this isn't your typical story. What we have here is a collection of monologues from several very distinct voices. Each speaker gives us a unique and, frankly, challenging perspective on the fundamental nature of reality, consciousness, and suffering. So, let's meet our first two speakers and see how this all starts to build. We're going to begin with two entities that explore consciousness from completely opposite ends of the spectrum. One is an ancient physical form, and the other is an artificial intelligence. It's a fascinating comparison, a real study in subjectivity. First up is the overgrown statue, and its worldview is starkly pessimistic, to say the least. It argues that the universe isn't just indifferent, it's actively malevolent, a sadistic plot. For the statue, cruelty isn't some bug in the system, it's a feature, a cosmic insistence, the very fabric of being. And then on the complete other hand, we have the robot roller. It kind of moves past simple pessimism and poses a much more complex philosophical problem. It really makes you question the basis of identity, asking, how can we really tell the difference between types of consciousness, especially if we admit that reality is more than just the physical stuff we can touch? Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The robot roller breaks down its own existential crisis for us. It basically argues that human responses, which, let's face it, are often based on making things up, emotion, and outright lies, aren't all that different from its own, which are just guided by data and probabilities. And that line we always assume exists between us and machines, it starts to get really, really blurry. All right, our next speaker shifts gears completely. We're moving away from the nature of being and into the nature of communication. The Frost Goblin presents this incredibly complex theory on linguistics and neurochemistry, basically reframing language not as a way to connect, but as a weapon. So, within this framework, the Frost Goblin is defined as the embodiment of rationalized violence itself. Its main tool isn't brute force, oh no. It's the strategic use of the ambiguity that's just baked into how we all communicate. And this right here brilliantly illustrates the Goblin's whole process. It's presented as a clear three-step method. Step 1, embrace ambiguity. Step 2, get your ideas from the darkest parts of the mind, the soil of nightmares. And finally, step 3, use all that confusion to literally trigger a physiological stress response in your target. It's a fascinating, if terrifying, model of psychological warfare through semantics. Let's turn now to our final two speakers. They ground their philosophies firmly in the natural world, presenting some pretty compelling, if unsettling, case studies on the violence and deception that, govern the entire biological kingdom. The carnivorous plant makes its argument from the perspective of a predator. It claims that deception isn't a moral failing, it's a fundamental law of nature. For this plant, the psychopathy inherent in nature is an observable, undeniable truth that justifies its own brutal existence. Can't really argue with that, can you? And here we see the plant's techniques laid out. These are not random acts. They're calculated strategies of deceit, from making sweet nectar to smelling like rotting flesh. And crucially, it points out how it exploits an evolutionary blind spot, that basic assumption that you're safe among your own kind. Brutal. And finally, we have the bull warrior. This entity offers a kind of socio-political reason for its actions. Its purpose, as it says, is to inflict pain, not just for fun, but because it's what the plurality wants. It's a bizarre form of malicious self-actualization apparently approved by a majority vote. This visual, it just elegantly represents the bull warrior's whole critique of political choice. The dilemma here isn't between good and evil. It's between two identical, violent outcomes. with one offering just a tiny cosmetic difference, a tiny bit of spice. It's a pretty grim commentary on the illusion of agency. So after looking at all these wild and chaotic philosophies, the big question is still there. What's the point? Is there a unifying principle here? We're now going to try to synthesize all of these perspectives into a single, coherent theory of malice. Wish me luck. So here's the thing. When you organize all the data like this, a pattern does start to emerge. Each speaker points to a different source of malice, from the cosmos to the ballot box, and has a method to match. What we're seeing isn't one philosophy. It's more like a diverse and overlapping taxonomy of malevolence, a whole menu of it.
So, our concluding analysis is this. The main theme seems to be that suffering is inevitable. Every single speaker provides a unique justification for it, building these complex philosophical houses of cards, however disparate or nonsensical, just to rationalize why things have to be so bad. But perhaps the most insightful analysis comes from the source text itself. In a moment of what feels like profound self-awareness, one of the speakers just asks, "What exactly is this nonsense?" It's a question that invites us to think about the ultimate purpose of such elaborate despair. And on that note, we'll conclude our analysis.